G'day guys, Chris Dorry here. Today I'm going to take you through some of the disruptive opportunities that there are for those that sort of look into the draft and the list management space. So for me, these are untapped, underutilized opportunities, and I think it's a real chance for a club to really get ahead. And you'll find in looking through some of these examples, there's pretty concrete evidence that those clubs that tap into these areas and do so really well can have really long-term sustained success, and they don't need high draft picks either to continue to achieve that success, which is what's particularly good about a lot of these things. So to start us off, opposition talent ID. So I'm looking at it at this stage as a very heavily underutilized area, and of course during that Hawthorn dynasty we had a lot of opposition players join Hawthorn, and for pretty reasonable prices at that, and really be a big part of their success. But I actually look at the Sydney 2012 Premiership side as really almost the team that did the very best in terms of looking at opposition talent, identifying them, and really for a very minimal spend, I guess you could say, just getting an enormous amount of value. So starting off, Ted Richards, traded from Essendon, so got him 2005. So it only took pick 19 and 51, and then the return was Richards and 55. So phenomenal get given the career Richards had as a key defender. And then you've got Reece Shaw. So it was just pick 46 for Shaw and pick 61, and that's remarkable value for Shaw given how long of a career he had with Sydney, but also being that really sort of, I guess, incredible driver from defence as well, just with all the running bounces, meters gained. It was a really important piece there. But what really made the difference for Sydney, and what really, I guess, took them to that premiership status in 2012 and really moved them out of being maybe even a bottom eight sort of team at that time to a genuine premiership contender, well, Shane Mumford was that guy for me. So it only took pick 28, so phenomenal get, phenomenal talent ID, sensational there by everyone involved who managed to pick up on just how good Mumford would be. I can't say at that stage I saw it coming, that's for sure. And then also in that same off season, you've got not only Mumford, but then you mix that with the likes of Josh Kennedy and Ben McGlynn. So, and again, to get those guys, all it took was picks 39, 46, and 70. So giving up nothing inside the top 25 and getting Mumford, Kennedy, and McGlynn, well, that's phenomenal. And the likes of Mumford and Kennedy were really up there with Sydney's very best players during that premiership. So just incredible haul there. And then the other one as well that Sydney should really be applauded for is Mitch Morton. So he was obviously a talent and just an inconsistent talent, but someone we're going to a new team that really sort of reinvigorated him. And it only cost pick 79. So, and again, a meaningful contributor to that premiership run. So some really incredible names and not much in terms of what had to be given up. And that's where I really see the opposition talent ID opportunities being. You don't have to spend the world or early picks to get good players. As per the Sydney model here, where they didn't really, other than the Ted Richards pick or trade, have to give up anything even inside the top 20 or top 25 for that matter. It's just incredible sort of getting that level of value. And also, it's important to note as well, so with that premiership team, there are only two players that were picked inside that top 20 that were drafted in that sort of 10-year period leading up to the premiership. So, and that was just, again, as I've already mentioned, Rowan and Jetta from that 2009 draft. And it's not like Rowan necessarily was a high-level player. It was more just, I guess he had potential and he didn't really live up to that level. But look, in saying that, is still in the competition and still a capable piece. And then, of course, Jetta. So he had a few good years, really explosive runner. But again, they're not the reason Sydney won the premiership. But a lot of these guys really played a significant part. And without them, there's no way that Sydney would have won that premiership, let alone been a top four side. So it all, for that group in particular, really came down to that opposition talent ID and really, I guess, putting in the time and energy and effort into it to really, I guess, get those opportunities and achieve the results they did and have that really long-term sustained success. So in terms of off-season targets that I'm looking at, so someone along that sort of, I guess you could say, Sydney model where he hasn't really had the opportunities, as you could say, of someone like a Mumford or a Kennedy. And I'm looking at a Jake Riccardi, where he just hasn't really had the run for GWS and he's been really underutilized. So he had the one game in the VFL early in the season where they put him in defence. So this was his first game this year. And he had the most phenomenal game. It was something like a 38 or 39 disposal game, 19 marks. So he just ripped it up. And then in the games after that, well, they've moved him into the front half. And again, you get multiple goals every game from him. He's just that really high leaping, incredible marking key forward. So you can really play him at either end for that matter. And you've just got a really good key position player who can really be had under what I view at least to be his real value as someone that GWS don't really have a need for. So he's one I'd definitely be targeting if he can be had for a reasonable price. And then some others that I'm looking at here as really being undervalued and available. So Stephen Cornelio. So although he's Greater Western Sydney's captain, well, he's just not, he hasn't been played, he's gone out of favour, gotten dropped. So given the calibre of player he is, and I guess that sort of thing happening to him, well, he's someone where he's absolutely a buy for me, where if you're getting, I guess, the calibre of player that he has been, and I don't think his game has really, I guess, gone downhill to that extent, and he's not 30 plus yet, so I still do think he has a few years. And again, if it's a reasonable price, if you're giving up a lot, look, forget it, but if you're giving up, I don't know, whether it's a mid-draft pick, maybe something later, well, that's phenomenal. You'd jump at that any day of the week, or at least I certainly would. You've got Sam Petreski-Seaton, so he's someone where for Carlton, a little bit out of favour, maybe an opportunity there in terms of just the sheer talent. I think he's a real talent, so with perhaps a change of opportunity and new environment, maybe he can reinvigorate his career, hopefully. Ben Brown for Melbourne, well, of course, over recent weeks, he's, I guess, regained a spot and he's looked quite a lot better for Melbourne and seems to have sort of started feeling a bit more comfortable, which is good there. But he's someone where, with the history of his durability, the history of being that really 60 goal a year key forward, not that I believe he can continue being that, but if he's someone where he isn't that clear best 22 player for Melbourne at the end of the year, I'd come knocking and see if he's really looking for that opportunity to be that definite guy. Even moving down from there, Alex Sexton. So he's been a Gold Coast leading goal kicker and had those weeks where he was just out of the team. So in more recent weeks, he's come back into the Gold Coast team and been a valuable goal kicker. So maybe he's available, maybe he's not. It's felt like for a few years now, he's sort of been on that fringe, in and out of the side. So I think he's one of those players where, a bit like going back a few years, the likes of a Jared Lyons and Aaron Hall, who were really silly guys to get rid of. Alex Sexton might be that next, not necessarily on that same level by any means, but I think he's a capable piece and capable forward who, for a team, if you really want that, I guess, medium goal kicker, well, he could be that guy and a valuable piece. Patrick Lipinski, I think, has been underused and underutilized by the Western Bulldogs. So whether it's being used as a sub, not getting the midfield opportunities, I think if you put him into a midfield for a team, just the signs I've seen when I've seen him in there, I think he's really got that, I guess, capability to break out and be a piece. And then, of course, you've got Josh Caddy. So he had that 1 year, I think it was in 2018, where when he played forward, he kicked something like, I think it was 46 goals. So he was at a 2-goal-a-game clip. So that's really excellent there. And he has the contested marking. He's that marking inside 50 sort of target when he's on. And I think that's where he plays his best footy. And I think that's really the opportunity Richmond have been missing with Caddy over recent years. Because to me, he's really almost that Jordan De Goey-esque, and you just don't have the price tag with him. So being that caliber of player, if I really want that, again, a bit like a Sexton, a good immediate sort of medium forward, I think Caddy's a really good piece. So just if I want that extra good piece up front. And then the next sort of, I guess, opportunity. So we've got State League ID. So I'm looking at that as undervalued. So an example of where it works, well, the most obvious one, of course, is Geelong and the mature age success they've had. So, and it's really allowed them from 2007 through even to now to be a contender and a perennial contender at that. So they haven't needed the early picks during that period of time. Hasn't mattered at all. So, and of those key guys, so we've got, of course, Harry Taylor, 2017, pick 17, incredible value, one of the best key defenders we've seen in the last 20 years. He's really in that conversation with, it might not be number one necessarily, but he'd be a top 5, certainly top 10 for me. You've got James Podsiadly, so phenomenal as a rookie pick, and one of those where, although he was nearing 30, well, it didn't matter. He was just that good, and he could just step into the Geelong side, really be a force up forward, like they hadn't seen in a number of years. So, really good pick there, and presented great value. If anything, really, Geelong should have held on to him for a few more years, I thought, at the end, but really well identified. Great job getting him as a rookie, so phenomenal. Mark Blitzarv, so category B rookie, so this is a little bit different, but again, he is those years older, so nonetheless, I will acknowledge him and group him in, even though it is a little bit of a different process where it's not so much scouring the state leagues. From there, you've got Sam Menegola, so of course he had opportunities with Fremantle and Hawthorn prior to playing with Geelong, and then he had that great year in the Waffle. And from there, so pick 66 really presented a lot of value there, and Geelong really capitalising on that opportunity. So Tom Stewart, 2016, pick 40. Is probably the best general defender in the competition for mine. So again, getting that value, staggering. Tim Kelly, 2017, pick 24. He's one of the better, he's not necessarily an all-Australian midfielder at the moment, but those initial years for Geelong, and look, he's still playing good footy. He was a really valuable piece, and just took so much pressure off the likes of your Dangers, your Selwoods, just really good. And getting that sort of value again, you can really see definitively the level of players and the level of bargains you can get for what you're paying, and that's the whole point. You really want to be able to get guys for less than what they're worth. And then Tom Atkins, 2018, so rookie draft. Again, really good pick. He's shown that he's a piece in defence this year. And my favourite this year, so we've got Blake Slenslog. So funnily enough, he was a Geelong Category B rookie. They delisted him last year. And he's shown pretty clearly this year that they delisted him a year too early. So perhaps had the VFL season gone on last year, maybe he would have shown them that development in front of their eyes on the field. But definitely seeing him in the Waffle this year. Look, to me, he's a top 20 sort of caliber pick this year in terms of, I guess, where I rate him compared to the rest of the talent this year. So whether it's key forward, key back, really like him. You could even have him as a relieving ruck, very competitive through the ruck. Just a really all-round talent, really good kick, reads it better than just about anyone that I've seen. So incredible ball reader, and also turns guys around, has that agility. So I think he's a really good piece there, and whichever end a team sort of settles him at AFL level, I think he's going to be really good. So could be an absolute bargain for anyone that looks at him sort of as a delisted free agent, given he was delisted last year. And then others on my draft board. So I've got Tyrone Thorne and Angus Baker. So Thorne's that sort of small midfielder forward, incredible athlete. That's what he brings to the table. Really brings the pressure, even though he's that smaller type. So he's that type where I think he's got that capability to play a role at AFL level and really be quite dynamic there. And then you've got an Angus Baker as a general defender, where for a few years I've been of the opinion that he's been the best general defender outside the AFL. And in the NEFL, of course, he was racking it up, just whether it's 30 disposal games, 10 mark games, and he's been doing the same in the VFL. It's translated over easily. He can translate that over to AFL play too. And he's really unfortunate that both during the preseason supplemental period and then the mid-season draft he wasn't picked, because for me, he was a no-brainer pick, really. So some overages who aren't regarded as highly as they should be. So this one, some might not necessarily agree, and there haven't been as many recent examples, but I'd put that down more so to clubs maybe not necessarily looking out for them or giving them as many opportunities as perhaps they could. And given there was no season in Victoria last year, and given there was a lot less exposure for the Queensland and New South Wales players, I think this is really something that clubs this year in particular should be looking really closely at, but also over the next few years if there's more sort of lockdowns or things happening or whatever the case may be. So... the year that we really saw an incredible I guess, valuation in terms of the overages picked was in 2001. So getting Sam Mitchell at pick 36, Brian Lake at 71, and then as rookies getting Aaron Sandilands and Matthew Boyd, well, that's just ridiculous. So if you can get that level of value, and of course recruiting has improved since then, but and I'm not necessarily expecting that extreme caliber of player being available at those parts of the draft who are overages, but nonetheless, I do still see quite a substantial amount of value. And this year, I've got a pretty clear favourite. So Jack Avery, and he's someone where he's on the fringe of my top 20 this year on my draft board. He didn't nominate for the mid-season draft, which is why he's not already on an AFL list. Slenslog, on the other hand, did, so he could have been picked up then. But with an Avery, he's just been dominating in the waffle. Despite playing in defence, he's really been that leader just in disposals, that real sort of, I guess, primary accumulator at the level, and he's just looked so sound. So defensively sound, intercepting everything, just involved in everything, just been looking really good. And then he's translated that over in more recent weeks to league level, where he's doing the exact same things at that level. So what that tells me is that that'll translate pretty easily to AFL play. And for me, he's a pretty low risk pick. So I think he'll be one of the bargains in this year's draft, and someone where you won't necessarily have to spend an early pick for him. And of course, for those AFL fantasy or Supercoach players out there, mark the name Jack Avery on your list, because he's someone where he's year one ready. He can just step into a team, be best 22, and he can really rack it up and be a piece. He is good defensively and can lock down if he needs to, but with that said, he's a great interceptor, can rebound a little bit, just finds a heap of the balls. So he's someone where definitely be aware of him. But others on my draft board at this stage, so if I was to produce a top 50, those that are currently in, and there's actually quite a few others in that mix, but I've got Josh Clark. So he's someone where I thought he was best on ground in Easton's game on the weekend, and just this sheer drive that he can generate is really phenomenal. So whether you're playing him off a halfback flank, on a wing, it's just the sheer run and carry, the run and dare, but then you've also got the skills to go with it that are not quite best in draft, but would be in that top probably 2 or 3 discussion for me. So I think he's a real piece, and although he's pretty skinny, could become a stronger ball winner, can really rack it up, but just so damaging. So he's that Aaron Hall flavour of player. So someone certainly very exciting. Sam Frost for GWS in the games I've seen for them when they've appeared in the NAB League, and he's also had success in the VFL as well. So there's a lot supporting his case. Looks like a really solid defender, and looks like he can be really a component to a team without necessarily having to be a star. So good interceptor, does most things pretty well ultimately. From there, you've got Max Pescud, so Gold Coast Academy last year. In the past, he'd been a really exciting forward, but this year he's really pushed up more sort of through the midfield on a wing, using those athletic gifts, and with the talent he has in that regard and around goal, I think he's got a real opportunity at AFL level to be a piece. And he's also had a good deal of success in the VFL as well. So he's someone I'm definitely keen on, and I think I'll be keeping on my draft board as well. And then Saxon Crozier. So he's about that 190 centimetre mid, covers the ground well, good skills. So you've got a bit of a basis there to build from. But the knock on him last year was that he couldn't win his own ball. Well, this year he's turned that around. He's become stronger, become a more capable ball winner. So having that better balance to his game is another where he can be a piece at AFL level potentially. So all those guys I'm really confident on, and I'm feeling like really should be in my top 50 this year in my power rankings. So do watch out for that. So another thing I'm missing here as well. So you've got the mature ages over 25, and of course I've mentioned James Podsey-Adley, but why I'm not mentioning really the examples here of where it's worked out, and I could also mention a Marlon Pickett for Richmond, who was probably in that mid-season draft just about that most successful, if not that most successful pick. But I'm really looking at guys where they've been there for so many years and they just haven't been picked up. So the ones that I'd target, and it's so straightforward, it's not funny. You've got Hayden Sloyth and you've got Jai Bolton. So with Hayden, the key is you've got a midfielder where he can rack it up 30 times a game, but he'd be one of the best kicks, if not the best kick in the state league. So he's got the kicking, vision, decision-making, hits the scoreboard, pressures well, wins his own ball. He's not slow, he's actually pretty quick. So he's got an all-round game. He can be a best 3 to 4 midfielder on a team. You can have him rotating forward. Why he's not on a list is just incredible. So in the year Tim Kelly got drafted pick 24, well, you had Hayden Sloyth win the Best in the Waffle award, and he was playing on the same team as Kelly, and he was the better player. So, and his play is still really good. So given all that, he's someone that absolutely for me is a no-brainer, needs to be on an AFL list. So, and then I'd say the same of Jai Bolton, where if I'm looking for a big game player, there'd be no one in the state leagues I'd pick before I would Bolton, where whenever it's a big occasion, he'll get his 40 disposals, win his 20 whatever contested possessions. But he's also got that sort of outside ability where he can still rack it up on the outside. He's not reliant on the inside stuff. So I'm just really looking at him as one of those really good midfielders that, frankly, Collingwood should have never delisted. So, and he's just gone from strength to strength, really been that consistent force across the state leagues where he's been that premier real sort of ball winner accumulator just for so many years now. And yeah, you could just, as with Sloyth, just slot him straight into a best 22 and you've got an instant midfielder right there. So they're the two I would target. You can get them as rookies given there's no one at all interested. And these guys are so much better than so many players on AFL lists currently. So if you're a team where you're just thinking my best 22 isn't good enough, well, get rid of some players. And that might be a Collingwood who really have, say, a best 13 or so. And then put these guys in the midfield. And they can be upgrades on your real sort of low level sort of shouldn't be best 22 players but are playing because you don't have anyone better types. So I'd be really comfortable with both of those guys. And you get those types around every year. And there was a few years back where Mitch Grigg was just phenomenal. So he was kicking something like 2 goals a game through the midfield and racking it up, doing so much damage by foot, winning it contested at a high rate. So you've just got so many of these guys over the years that, unfortunately, by no fault of their own, really just haven't received those opportunities. Or I guess those second chances in some cases, a bit like with a Podsy Adley that they should have. Although in his case, luckily he did in the end. But yeah, the next opportunity I'm seeing, so international recruits I'm looking at as another sort of undervalued opportunity. So if we really look at, I guess, the genetics, the body types of people from particular countries, you can really see some opportunities in particular positions. So for me, I'd be looking right away to the US, where I think there's great opportunities to get some ruckman there. So you've got some 7-footers out there where you've just got unmatched sort of length, strength, power. Like they could be something like a Nick Nat plus if you bring them over. So where you've got someone who's taller, stronger, but with the exact same athleticism and power. So I just think that's a real opportunity missed. And if I was to tell myself going back 7-8 years we'd have no American ruckman in the competition, I would have thought you're kidding yourself. But that's sort of how it's worked out. Of course, we've had Mason Cox as a success up forward, or at least a relative success given he's an international player. But I think there's some real opportunities out there that just really need to be explored that haven't really been pushed hard enough. So for a club that I guess really seeks out that type of player, I think there's a real opportunity out there for someone where they're taller than your Aaron Sanderlands, but they've got that, I guess, leap, the strength, the power of a Nick Nat, where they can, whether it's tap the ball to advantage, win their own ball at the stoppage and just charge forward. You can have guys hanging off them trying to bring them to ground, and they'll keep generating that power moving forward. Well, you've got those types of athletes in America that we just don't produce here. We don't have those, I guess, physical attributes to be able to do those things. So that's the sort of thing I'd be looking for. Even if they're short of 7 foot, that's fine. But if you've got those 7-footers or near that sort of height, well, you've really got opportunities through the ruck to really find someone, and someone pretty special. And then what I'm looking at next as well, and this I covered in my last video, but I'm looking at, so veterans and leaders, I'm looking at really as grossly undervalued in their impact on winning, culture and player development. So for those that are interested in my thoughts on that topic, so refer to my previous video, The Real Reason Why Gold Coast and Greater Western Sydney failed to win a premiership, not even AFL clubs understand. So those that watched it enjoyed the insight there, and I'm sure learnt quite a number of things. So if you're interested in that, I would check that out. But yeah, what I'm seeing basically, to summarize, is those very bottom teams that have got rid of, I guess, all their veteran players, don't have, I guess, that base of leaders, they're the ones where, even though they're drafting these early picks, they're not able to develop to the same extent of those, I guess, better teams that have those established cultures, have those established leaders. And the difference is stark, whether it's your Scott Pendlebury's developing when you've got the likes of Buckley, Clement, Rocker, Burns, Maxwell all there, or whether it's a Joel Selwood where you've got the likes of Tom Harley, you've got Cameron Ling, you've got all those types of people who are such valuable leaders there, or a Matthew Scarlett even. So just really phenomenal when you see that difference. You could look at an Adelaide with a Patrick Dangerfield, and then you compare that and you look at the veterans they had on that team as well, who were excellent leaders too. And you compare that to the bottom teams that have had the number one picks, and it's really telling that so few number one overall picks have experienced that premiership success. Obviously, you've had your Luke Hodge, but there have been few others that I can immediately think of top of mind, just because your Carltons, your Melbournes, who have had all those years of number one picks, just haven't had those veteran leaders. Same with Gold Coast. Ablett wasn't good enough as a leader. You really needed a lot of leadership around him to take that team and develop that youth anywhere. And Greater Western Sydney, well, until they had Mumford and Heath Shaw, they weren't going anywhere because they didn't have, I guess, that core of veteran leaders that really, I guess, had an impact on the group. So that's just a basic summarized thought there. But for me, I'd be looking, if I'm going to be taking a few guys early draft, and I really want to, I guess, develop a team from basic and rebuild, I'm going to make sure I've got those veteran leaders. And I think even more important than any of the points I've mentioned in this video, I would even stress that this is the absolute key. So if there's, say, a Brent Harvey who gets cut and they say, no, end your career now, well, I would be taking that opportunity, getting that type of piece where he can set that example for the playing group and really drive the standards at my club and really set, I guess, a perspective that is just really going to help the development of the young players. So there's all sorts of different leaders in the form of veterans, and it's really important if they're getting cut early, if there's an opportunity to acquire one, I would jump at that. And in my next video I've got planned, I'm going to go a bit further into the concept of veteran leadership and really go into some case studies as to, I guess, those teams that have had those veteran leaders, what have happened, and then on the other hand, of course, those teams where they haven't had a sufficient number of veterans and they really haven't had that core of leaders to develop their group. I really want to prove that point and drive that home, because in the AFL industry, I'm not seeing one single club that have really, I guess, understood the value of veteran leaders and I guess really embrace that philosophy as I've seen in a sport like the NBA, where you'll surround your superstar and your star players with really a strong group of veterans to really, I guess, drive those standards, be those consistent pieces, and I guess really create a substantial amount of value towards winning. So yeah, it's not all about young guys at the end of the day, and it's always easy, even if you do have a bunch of guys retiring, it's actually quite a bit easier than a lot of people think to actually discover those next pieces, find those undervalued components that can really, I guess, take over from those veterans that are leaving. So my opinion is quite strongly that you don't actually ever have to rebuild and that you don't ever have to bottom out. So but yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future updates, and I'll see you in the next video.